Local stories, local people. We're taking you inside Western Mass news. It's the Even Better Western Mass podcast with Dave Madsen.
Welcome to this week's edition of the Even Better Western Mass podcast. Well, here we are in the dog days of August, still with more questions than answers as to where the country is headed with COVID-19. In this week's edition of Even Better, we look at social media. Nearly everyone uses it today in some way, shape, or form. Business.com reports that over 3 billion people use social media regularly, and that 80% of Internet users have at least one social media account. My guest is Michelle Abdow, the founder, owner, and director of Market Mentors in Springfield. It's a full-service marketing, advertising, and public relations firm. Michelle and I talk about the upside and downside of social media and why it's important that your company or business have a social media policy in place. Yeah, we're seeing more and more incidents of people in very prominent positions getting in trouble over social media posts. Right. I think when we're on social media, we don't think about these things, but these are things we need to think about.
Absolutely. I think it's difficult. People want to voice their opinions, and sometimes they have to be very careful because once you post it, it's out there and everybody sees it. And if you post something negative, the whole world sees it because it goes viral. People forward it, they make comments about it, and then next thing you know, your reputation could be ruined because you said something that inappropriate or something that could have been deemed, very controversial.
You're dealing with companies and businesses each and every day. Do you find that many of them don't have social media policies, and those that don't, my guess is you're telling them very quickly you need one?
Absolutely. So we certainly are not attorneys, but when things boil up, let's say an employee of a company posts something that could be controversial. The employer doesn't know about it until someone who saw it writes them a message saying, does this person work for you? Is this where your company position is? Is this how you believe things should be run? And that's when we get the call as a public relations firm, like, what do we do with this? So first and foremost, we always say, do you have a social media policy? Has your attorney drafted one for you? In most cases they do, but sometimes it may not cover everything. So we always encourage our clients, once a year, have it looked at, make sure that it's cleaned up, make sure your employees review it and sign it, make sure all of your new employees that you may have hired during the year are aware, and just let them know what could possibly happen. So that's very important to make sure, and that the employees are aware as well.
These are becoming terms of employment, aren't they?
Definitely, in many cases. I mean, we do have freedom of speech, but the biggest issue is, you have to make sure you're not posting anything that could be threatening, intimidating, harassing, or anything that's discriminatory. That's the biggest issue. People are entitled to their opinions. They're entitled to write whatever they want to write, but they have to be careful with those things because anything that could be deemed threatening that's just bad, really bad.
Now, even with something like that, though, I know we've seen a couple of instances now, too, not necessarily involving companies, but, municipal operations where these posts were not made on the on the accounts of who they're working for, but on their personal accounts. So that also comes into play with these, too.
Absolutely. I mean, when people, most people in their About Us section, in their profile, will usually post where they work. So, if you work for a company and let's say it's, a very well-known retailer, for example, and you're posting things that could potentially be threatening or intimidating or derogatory or harassing, that people will look at who is this person? Where do they work? Where do they live? They want to know who they're friends with. And that's when, the company will usually email through their inbox, or they could end up getting something through their social media channel. Best case scenario, the person private message saying, this person is posting something negative. I want to understand if this is what your company stands for. But what happens most of the time, people are very vocal. So they'll say, get a load of this guy. Look what he posted. Shame on them. And he works for XYZ company. Shame on them too. And that's where the issue really can become bubbled up in a negative way for the company. Unfortunately, the company didn't post it, but the person works for the company. So it becomes a byproduct.
And how quickly too these can spill out to literally thousands of people. Say, I have 5,000 followers on my Facebook account, and it hits somebody else with another 5,000, and it's a snowball effect.
It's a snowball effect. I mean, there was something that happened about, I want to say 3 weeks ago. There was a lovely little company in East Longmeadow. I won't state their name, but somebody posted something that was really derogatory on social media, and they had the name of this company in their profile as a company of whom they work for. Find out company in Canada with a similar name. So fortunately, it was not an employee of the company in East Longmeadow, but a company in Canada with the exact same name. But the company in East Longmeadow got the backlash. So fortunately for them, it was a quick fix. This is not us. But if it were one of their employees, they would definitely have to do a lot of damage control at that point. So we always encourage employers not only to look at their social media policy, make sure their employees are aware of it and they review it with their employees annually. We also want to make sure that people are making sure that they're just looking at their social media in general and monitoring it, because that's an important factor of it.
It's so many companies and businesses getting into social media today, because do you think the value of social media outweighs the risks?
Well, I think, you have to be on social media. I mean, at certain companies, there might be certain manufacturing companies that don't necessarily need to, but anybody who is public facing, any company that's facing the public, that's serving, the yous and me's of the world, from financial services to retail to anything that you're able to buy, consumer based, you really have to be there. And I think the other important aspect of it is being responsive. So if something negative does get posted, it's very important that the company acknowledges it. This is not what we stand for. And they take it offline, take the conversation offline, to make sure that the people who could potentially be customers of the business are knowing that that's not what they stand for.
So basically, if you're on social media, you do need a social media policy. What is there a standard social media policy, or does it vary from company to company?
That is really, we are not attorneys. We always recommend, talk to your employment attorney for businesses. That's really important for that to be drafted up. It really does vary by company. Some companies are pretty lax. Some might be a little bit more firm in terms of what you can and cannot post. So it has to be really, you have to be very careful. And companies should also be prepared. What do we do in the event that something like this happened? What can we do? So in our world, in marketing and communications, we call it crisis communications. So what do? You have to have a strategy in place. Who's going to be your spokesperson? What are you going to say? And who are your constituencies? Is it your customer base? Is it your employees? Is it your donor base? Is who else in the community needs to be made aware of what your message is, just so you can do any damage control.
It's one of those things where you never like to think about it, but it's always, you realize, oh, I don't have it in place when you need it the most, or when something has happened.
Right. So we always encourage, you don't have to have an actual crisis communication plan in place, but you should have an outline of one. What would you do in the event that something like this happened? Because then you can rally your troops together and kind of attack it. So in some larger companies, you'll probably have a communication manager or a director of marketing, somebody that would probably address this. But things can get out there pretty quickly. And then, Dave, from, in the media, when the media gets a hold of it, then it becomes news and it just exacerbates it. So not only is it going viral, but the news is reporting on it. And that's when things can really mount up.
Yeah, and that's, I find, and I remember, when I first got into television news, it's like we would never go with anything until it was confirmed by 3 sources. But now with social media, that's changed that whole dynamic. And as you mentioned, these things can balloon and get out of control very, very quickly if you don't get right on top of it.
Absolutely. So again, going backwards, most social media policies, they should just, they should always prohibit anything that prohibits activity that could be threatening, intimidating, harassing, any type of discrimination. Those 4 things need to be woven into a policy. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I would definitely recommend any employer speak with an employment attorney to draft that language for them. But you've got to be very careful of that.
And even from the personal aspect of these things, that, I mean, you're hiring in your business and in any other business. And one of the things a lot of these companies do look at now is your social media, of your Facebook and your Twitter and what your posts have been.
It definitely happens. I mean, once you put it out there, it's public. The public can consume it. So, in certain organizations do not use social media to look at a potential candidate, but in the advent of LinkedIn and other social media, if you Google that candidate's name, you're going to see the history of what they've posted online. So, sometimes it's tempting. It's tempting to, maybe say something against somebody else, or maybe you have your own opinions of things, and that is okay. But anything that could be derogatory, you have to be very, very careful. And so the old adage is, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all. So on the side of the employee or anybody posting on social media, that's the best advice is, do what your mom always taught you. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all.
And I know you've got a lot of people who go to work for a business, and I think it's a lot of young folks coming out of college, and social media has been a part of their life from day one. It's like,
Absolutely.
I'm sometimes you wonder if they think too, and this is, not to categorize everybody as being the same. Well, it's like, you're infringing on my personal rights. You can't tell me what I can and can't do.
Right. Right. Well, you have to think about it. If someone's saying something that could be negative about somebody else, you're going to be judged. You are going to be judged no matter what. I mean, you have to be very careful.
When you go in to see a business for the first time, is social media one of the things you talk to them about first, and having a kind of policy?
Well, it depends. A lot of times social media is brought up because it is a public-facing entity that really is demonstrating who the company is, what they believe in. So we always look at that and say, who's posting? Who's monitoring any type of post on behalf of the company? Is someone looking at this? How frequently are you updating your materials? How often are you putting up promotions and things of that nature? And then people can comment on those. So you have to be careful to make sure that the comments are positive. We're in the day and age where, reviews are a big thing. As much as many of us hate them, a lot of businesses hate them. You think of a car dealer and somebody goes in and doesn't get approved on a loan. Now they're mad. They're mad at that car dealer. So they might go on to social media and say that car dealer is terrible. Well, no, your credit is terrible and it's really your own fault, but the car dealer can't write that. So, people have to take some things in stride and wonder, there's another adage is there's this side, there's this side, and then in the middle is the truth. So we always tell people you have to be very careful and you have to look at it with a good lens.
And that's the sad thing. I always look at the downside of social media too. I used to see it at the TV station. It continues to happen too. They call them the trolls.
The trolls, yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trolls out there for sure.
Who are out there, and this is what they do all the time, and with no really thought into what the damage they can do, and that's the other part of it, is the damage that can be done with even just a few words.
Get a little bit away from social media. If you look at online reviews, some of the review sites, you could go on, Dave, you had a great experience at a local restaurant, or you went somewhere and it was a wonderful experience, and you go on and you put something wonderful about that company, but you very rarely post in the review sites. But then there could be someone like me who does review every company, good, bad, ugly, indifferent. Because I review so often by that app, that company that owns the app, I am a more frequent reviewer. So my review, whether it's good, bad, is going to trump your wonderful review. So unfortunately, the negative reviews are always the ones that seem to work their way up to the top. So it's a little unfair justice for businesses sometimes. So that's why we always say, there's two sides to every story, and you have to know what the middle is.
Yeah, that's part of the problem. I mean, that's something that used to bother me in television more than anything else, is that, that you can get 10 people saying wonderful things about you, and it's that one really negative one that just kind of sits with you forever, and you can't get over it. You can't move on. Right.
People go out of their way to say something negative, but very rarely do they go out of their way to thank, to compliment, to pay tribute to, unfortunately. So I'd love to see more of that, more positivity out there. In today's day and age, we could all use a little positive.
We sure can. And I'm sure one of the things you talk to your clients about too is be careful how you respond to a lot of these people on social media, because again, you just don't know who's on the other end.
Absolutely. So we have a little mantra here is publicly acknowledge, take the conversation offline. And that's the advice we give to everybody. So if somebody posts something negative within the feed of Facebook or Instagram, and thank you, Dave, for your comments. We really would like to connect with you. Could you private message us, or could you private message us your phone number? We'd like to have a conversation with you. And that actually speaks volumes about the company, because anyone looking at that says, wow, they really care. This customer or potential customer is not happy. They want to engage with this person. They want to make it right. And so I think it's really important to show that you have good customer service. And that's really what it becomes at that point, customer service.
And I know you deal with a lot of companies around here, and one of the reasons for their success is that customer service. So you're right. It's like and I guess that's another talent as far as you're developing it through the years is, okay, which ones do I really need to pay attention to because they're legitimate, and which ones do I kind of ignore because, well, they're just people who are going to criticize to criticize.
Right. Well, social media can be such a valuable tool, and on the flip side of it, it is a time-consuming piece of media that needs to be paid attention to, because you never know what could potentially happen, right? You're allowing people to comment. People are more engaged now than ever. Everybody's got their smartphones with them. They carry it around. We're a dual screen society. So we have, our computer, we're in front of our TV, but we're also, on Facebook or on Instagram or on Snapchat.
When you started in business too, I mean, I'm sure dealing with the clients, it was, all right, we're going to deal with radio, TV, newspaper, and cable. And now there's this
Exactly.
social media aspect. And for the many, and how you've seen social media grow through the years, and how many companies are changing their advertising strategies because of it.
Absolutely. It is really, it's changed exponentially, and with social media, it allows you to reach beyond the marketplace that you're serving in. So it really can make you regional, national, global, and especially if you do sell online. So TV is still one of the most popular and viable media for advertisers. Anybody who wants to reach the consumer base, it's still one of the strongest. Radio, cable. But social media advertising and any type of digital advertising really helps kind of home in on bringing in that new business and reaching the customer base, and actually creating customer loyalty too, because now you can engage with them, you can interact with them, you can have your ads served to them. In the digital world now, it's kind of it's almost frightening how targeted you can be to your exact consumer base.
Yeah, exactly. And again, let's, as we look at this year, how COVID-19, all of these, the companies that you deal with and the businesses you deal with, we've got our strategy for the year. And then all of a sudden COVID-19 comes along and just blows everything up.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think our days became, an 8-hour day to 12 to 16-hour days during COVID-19. All of our clients needed communications wrapped around their policies for COVID-19, any closures, any delays, what they're going to be doing. All of their advertising in most cases ceased, but some clients did. Some of our customers really put their best foot forward and said, this is an opportunity for us to reach people. TV usage, radio usage, and digital usage went up immensely during those months. We subscribed to syndicated research, Nielsen being one of them, and we just looked at all the numbers and we could see a surge of use. The other thing that we noticed also is during that time, we look at our clients' website traffic as well. We saw more desktop usage, meaning people are sitting in front of their computer logging on to clients' websites as opposed to their cell phones, which we saw, it started to kind of teeter a little bit. People were in front of their computers at home. They really couldn't go anywhere. So they were looking at social media on their computer as opposed to when they're on the go at a restaurant or maybe waiting at a doctor's office waiting to be seen. They're using their cell phones. And when you can't go anywhere, you're stuck at home. Why not look at a bigger screen? So you can see the differences, and the data shows all of that, which is really interesting to see.
What are you hearing from your clients at this time? I mean, because there's just the other part of this now is the uncertainty. I think many of us thought, well, in March, okay, we'll shut down for a few months, and by summer we'll be on our way. But as
Right.
we look at it now, in Massachusetts, things are doing fairly well. But in other parts of the country, where I'm sure many of your companies and businesses you represent are doing business, it's a whole different story.
It's a whole different story, right? So I think right now what we're seeing is some mild optimism because we're starting to gradually open up. People are starting to get out. People are itching to spend their money, which is kind of a nice thing. Um, so I think we're seeing a little bit of a surge. I think we'll continue to see that surge. I am by far not an economist, but I do think that companies are going to start looking at their overall budget and, as they get towards the end of the year and seeing where they stand come, fourth quarter and saying, do we have to adjust? What do we have to do? Can we spend more? Should we spend less? So we're cautiously optimistic. And at the same time, we want to be mindful of what the health officials are saying. They're saying that we could have another surge. Cases are going up, but hospitalization rates are going down, which is excellent. That means more and more people are getting tested. Most people are asymptomatic, and at least that's what all the news is reporting. So that's a good sign, but we want to obviously be mindful of it and make sure that our clients are ready to adapt their plans, their media plans, and all of their communications in case we do have a surge.
I'm sure that's one of the things you've seen through the last few months is the adaptability of your clients. And well, I guess in this day and age, you have to be. What's their general attitude about things? Are they feeling better now?
I think overall, everybody's feeling much better. They're opening their doors. They're inviting customers into their locations. Banks are now allowed to see customers. Obviously, many social distancing policies in place and protocols for cleaning. But you have all the hair salons opening up. You have restaurants that are opening back up, and people are just eager to get out. And it's nice because there's outdoor dining and there's more open spaces, which is great too. We're seeing a lot more optimism. But I think, as I mentioned, any business owner, any entrepreneur is going to be cautious as they get back into the groove again, and be mindful of what's happening. Are we going to have a surge? Is there a vaccine? When's the vaccine going to come out? And I think that's give up once we have a vaccine in place.
And you were mentioning more people on their computers and everything else, and again, bringing us back to social media. That over the last few months, more people have had more time to be on social media too. And let's face it, everybody's got an opinion.
Oh yes, you're seeing that everywhere, right? And sometimes it's hard to keep your opinion to yourself. Sometimes it's I disagree with that, or I fully agree with that. And then there's some people who just say, you know what, the best thing, and I really try to subscribe to this as much as possible. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. I can't, that's the best insurance policy that anyone could subscribe to.
And that's it. You've been in the business long enough to know that that's the thing that's going to do the most damage. Whether it was before social media, and but now it's part of our everyday life, whether we like it or not. And I'm sure there's folks out there who've never been on social media and don't understand it. I envy a lot of those people who don't have to be on Facebook and don't have to be on Twitter.
I agree. Sometimes I wish we didn't do this for a living because we're forced to be on social media. I always say in my personal life, it's the greatest time suck. I could be reading a book, I could be outdoors, I could be doing so many other things, but when you have to be checking things, you got to be careful. But it's easy to get sucked in, as they say.
Yeah, you do think about that. It's like, gee, what did I do with that time 20 years ago? Now all of a sudden I have it. Yeah.
What did we do? We read the newspaper, we watched the news, we didn't even have online portals to gather the news. We are such a connected society. I mean, you can communicate with people, friends that are overseas. I mean, think about it now. We're on Zoom right now. Think about how we're connecting. It used to be you'd have to bring a camera, you'd have to bring a microphone and lighting and somebody else to run the equipment. Here we are, just the two of us having a conversation on our computers. So it's come a long way, and I think we're going to see a lot of technology that's going to continue to shape our world. It's really definitely taking hold of how we operate today as businesses and as consumers.
I know. Yeah, we found that in the television business. These things that you realize now that, so many companies now reassessing their, what do we have to have employees here, and how much actually social media and this, because I know there's been some issues with Zoom where people kind of bombard Zoom and
Yeah.
because it's not necessarily the safest thing, but it's
Right.
an amazing piece of technology. And when you look at it, even the business of television news now, where we're doing interviews like this, and we used
Mhm.
to worry about, oh, you've got to have your studio quality camera and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Folks don't need that anymore.
Right. We actually have had several conversations with the newsroom at Western Mass News as a joke because, our clients who are being interviewed for news stories are, used to be the camera crew is going to be there at 10. They're going to be, asking for such and such, be ready. Make sure you have we get them prepped for, the news crew to come out. Now it's, can you log on to Zoom or, to some technology to be interviewed? And it's often at the comfort of their own home or maybe their own office. The quality isn't nearly as good, but it sure is convenient. So we're trying to tell our clients, like, listen, when this lifts, you're not going to have that convenience anymore. You have to bring a brush and some hairspray to work because the news crew's coming to see you. So,
Or be like me and just do it from the basement.
yeah, you're like one of those teenage kids that's got their own podcast in their basement. You're one of the cool kids now.
I feel like
You've come a long way, Dave.
yeah, it's a poor man's version of Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, exactly. I was going to say that. I was going to say that. Game on.
One piece of advice to give to any business or individual out there about what they need to do just to protect themselves.
Businesses, number one, have a social media policy in place for your employees. Make sure you review it annually and make sure your employees understand what kind of repercussions could happen if they do fail to follow the policy. And they should also have a even an outline, if you will, of what their strategy is going to be like if they have to go into crisis communication mode. What is that going to look like? Who are the players within your organization? And if you don't feel comfortable, I would say contact an employment attorney to help you draft that policy. And you can give us a call if you want, to help you with the crisis communications. This for actual people who are consumers, just be careful what you post. Be mindful that anything that you say will be used against you. So keep it positive. Keep it social. It's social media. Make it social.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I guess that's where we've kind of gotten away with it. Especially, I think any of us with kids too, or grandkids, knowing that, okay, here's the dangers of this. I mean, it's something that we have to warn them about too.
Right. Things were getting heated, I would want to say about a month ago, and it was just such negative things on social media that I just, for fun, I posted, all right, everybody, post a picture of your dog. And it was probably the most lengthy post that we ever had because people were just posting pictures of their dogs. And thank you for doing this. This is something positive that we can focus on. So be lighthearted and take it with a grain of salt.
Indeed. Well, Don Anderson, right? From the Cruise Store and the attorney.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And Don, one of the most fun things is Don's pun page.
That's right. That's right.
On Facebook. And it's like, thank goodness. I mean, because it is, you need it.
Yeah. And then you look at Some Good News. You probably saw that podcast that was happening as well.
John Krasinski, yeah.
That's right. Keeps it light and fun.
It is. I mean, there's just so much negative out there. We need that.
Right. You can't get sucked into the negative. You got to keep it positive. Keep your chin up.
My thanks to Michelle Abdow for being part of this week's Even Better Western Mass podcast. You can contact Market Mentors for more information on a social media policy for your company. Thanks to you for watching this week's edition of Even Better Western Mass. Stay well, and if you can, join me next week.